Today, my friends, I am here to show you how you can build a framework for your career bridge building using a strengths-based approach. And here's the fun part. As you'll see on the slides, on the photos, each of us, when we take the strengths-based approach, is going to have a very different bridge. We're all going to have different bridges based on our strengths. Maybe you're here because you're still trying to figure out what the heck you want to do when you grow up, right? Sometimes I feel like I'm still going through that. Maybe you're here because you're already on that bridge of your career. You're already in a place where your career is moving along, you're feeling really good about where it's at. But you're curious about what this strengths-based approach to human development is. And you want to figure out how to maximize your career growth by maximizing the utilization of your strengths. Maybe you're a leader that's here, and you want to grow in your leadership capacity and capabilities. And maybe you want to take the strengths-based approach and help grow the career bridges of those that you lead. Maybe you're working with students, or maybe you are a student, and you're trying to chart what career growth could be. If any of that resonates with you, you're in the right place today. Now, since we're talking about career bridges, I must ask, how many of you, show of hands, have seen with your own eyes what Frommer's has listed as the most photographed bridge in the world, the Golden Gate? Anybody ever been there, stood on it, seen it? Right? It's a marvel to be upon. It's a work of art. It's an engineering marvel. And the fun part is 20 years before its opening, on May 27th, 1937, the bridge chief engineer sat across from the San Francisco City chief engineer, Mike O'Shaughnessy. Mike O'Shaughnessy looked at him and said, "You know, Joseph, everybody says it's impossible to build a bridge across the Golden Gate. Why don't you design a bridge for the Golden Gate?" 20 years after that question was asked to Joseph Strauss in 1917, the bridge opened. And on that night, Joseph, who was a poet his whole life, recited this poem that he wrote. At last, the mighty task is done. Resplendent in the western sun, the bridge looms mountain high. Its titan piers grip the ocean floor. Its great steel arms link shore with shore. Its towers pierce the sky. To understand the gravity of that moment and Joseph's ability to conquer the sea, the earth, and the sky with the building of the Golden Gate Bridge, we need to go back to September of 1889 to the University of Cincinnati campus. There was 40 football players on the field before the coach came, and out of the tunnel comes 5 foot, 120-pound Joseph Strauss. He walks onto the field, and some of the players look at him and they say, "Are you here to try out for football? You look like a football." And before he knew it, they grabbed him, picked him up, and started throwing him around like a football. Despite his best attempts, Strauss was unable to conquer these giants. He spent over 2 weeks in the hospital recovering from the injuries that he received. During that time, the captain of the football team came and visited him. He apologized profusely, and he told him, he said, "You know, Joseph, you're really a great sport. You're really a great sport. But maybe football is not the right place for you to be." Now, from this experience on the football field and being in the hospital, his view from his window in the hospital as he lay recovering was the Cincinnati-Covington Bridge that spans the Ohio River. You know that bridge? Yep. That bridge was there, and he stared at it during his time that he was in the hospital. Now, he obviously had a lot of time to ponder, to reflect, to connect some dots. This bridge was also visible from his parents' home. so he'd been around it his whole childhood. He found a sense of comfort and strength when he saw this suspension bridge. There was something about it that gave him hope, gave him strength. He realized in his time that he was there that he had a knack for engineering. He also had a knack for art. You see, one of his parents was a painter, the other parent was a musician. So he grew up in the state of regularly being around art. During this time of staring at this bridge, he also appreciated the connection that it brought, connecting one side of a river to another, bringing people together. He realized that the piers and the bridge were the conquering of giants, far greater than the ones that had conquered him on the football field. Joseph, though small in stature, realized that something was being born in him during that time, and his goal was to conquer the giants of earth, sea, and sky. He had no idea what would be in store for him during his career. Now, 3 years post that hospital experience, he graduates with a degree in civil engineering. He was the class president and the class poet. For his senior paper, he wrote a paper on the Bering Strait and how to build a bridge over it, connecting North America and Asia. Now, I don't think that bridge is ever going to be built, but if it does, that would be a good paper to start with. It took him a few years after graduating to actually land his first bridge that he was going to build. He taught before then. He worked on designs of other bridges. But in 1897, he had the opportunity to build his first bridge. That was actually 40 years before the Golden Gate Bridge was completed. Now, as he started on this journey, over his lifespan, he would actually build over 400 bridges across the world. Over this time, Mr. Strauss continued that discovery of his talents. He continued honing them, his engineering mastery. It was in that time that he had learned while he was in the hospital that he was going to create art through engineering. And that first bridge was just the beginning of that journey. Over this time, as we can imagine, he also had to deal with lots of people. He had to convince them that bridges could be built in areas where they didn't think they could be. He had no idea the task that he'd be facing when he was asked that question in 1917. In connecting with people, he was able to identify his weaknesses to create more strength. And by that, I mean by building complementary partnerships, figuring out where his weaknesses were, and not thinking that he could solve it all on his own, but that he could actually partner with the right people who had strengths in areas that he did. As we transition, this is Joseph Strauss on the bridge. Now, in 1933, that's when construction actually started on the bridge, and he was asked in 1917 if he could design this bridge. Over the course of those 16 years, the remaining 4 to build it, Joseph had to really hone those talents that he had developed over his career. He had to get buy-in from local officials, from federal officials. He had to get buy-in from the local population on the cost, on the design of the bridge, of what it would look like. He faced the challenges. People thought, this is going to make this beautiful strait not look beautiful anymore. It's going to be an eyesore. He had to convince them that he could design something that was artistic and that would actually enhance the beauty of the area. Over the course of that time, he was an ally early on with Mike O'Shaughnessy, the city engineer. They went out, they spoke, and they were able to successfully convince the population over those 16 years that this was a bridge that could be built. Over that time, Joseph Strauss faced incredible personal attacks. People were questioning his competency, his credibility, and the impossibility of actually building a bridge that could stand. He thought that he was in it for personal gains. No personal attack on him was more painful than the end of the time before the bridge started, when Mike O'Shaughnessy, his once ally, turned on him and started questioning his competency and credibility. This is what he had to endure. He had a personality that could convince people. But working with him sometimes was not that easy. He could be a bit of a challenge to work with. During the Golden Gate Project, he was able to bring on board an assistant, Clifford Payne. And Clifford Payne had a knack for working with Joseph. He was comfortable in pushing back. He was comfortable in debating him, challenging his ideas. But before they hit their cadence of realizing they were incredible complementary partners, one day Joseph went at it with Clifford, and Clifford just got up and just said, "I'm out of here," walked out. One of the best decisions that Joseph made was to go back, pull Clifford into his orbit. And what Joseph realized in that moment when he walked out is that Clifford covered Joseph's weaknesses. He was a powerful complementary partner. His willingness to challenge him on engineering, on the artistic designs of the bridge, was going to allow them to get to a better bridge than Joseph would have gotten to on his own. And of course, during this time, even while the bridge was being constructed, there was many different redesigns and re-engineering that had to take place based on the conditions that came out. In this day and age, when you take a look at that bridge is actually a perfect symbol of what their relationship was and why that bridge stands today. So if we look at the suspension bridge that the Golden Gate is, with the two towers, it has cables pulling to the north of the bridge and to the south of the bridge. It's a healthy amount of tension. That healthy amount of tension gives strength to the bridge, and that's what gives it its rise, to keep the span standing. That bridge is a testament to their relationship. And the interesting thing is, in our lives, that's exactly how our complementary partnerships work. So I imagine on May 27th, 1937, when Joseph Strauss read that poem, where he had successfully conquered the giants of earth, of sea, and of sky, I imagine this Mahatma Gandhi quote would have resonated with him. Maybe you've seen this before. Anybody seen this quote? First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. That was the trajectory of what he experienced. Now here's the fun part. I need to zoom this into us. Why are we talking about Joseph Strauss? Now if you look at the first two parts of that, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you. Sometimes it's us ignoring ourselves. It's not them. Sometimes it's us laughing at ourselves. You all know that you've had times where there's talents and things that you could do, and you can see a different way. You felt it in work. You may have felt it in your home life and in different things, and you're like, I'm going to ignore that. I'm going to ignore that whisper that Joseph had in the hospital bed of what he could do, the impact that he could make, the giants that he could conquer. Then they laugh at you. Sometimes it's not them. Sometimes it's us laughing at us. Oh, you think you can create a career that you want to actually enjoy. You think you can be engaged in work. You think you can play to your strengths. Ha ha. This is the reality of how we are. And this is a part of who we are, and we have to be mindful of it. When we look at the arc of Joseph's life and his career and the legacy that he's lived with what he's created with his bridges around the world, and most notably, the Golden Gate, what was his playbook? What was his blueprint? This is it, and this is why you're all here today. Joseph had a career bridge that was based in a strengths-based approach. And because he focused on his strengths from that time in the hospital in Cincinnati, he continued to discover his strengths and rediscover them. He aimed those strengths. He refined them. And this all took place over the course of his career. And then he did it all over again. It was just a process. He kept on going. He was able to manage around weaknesses. His experience with Clifford Payne really told that story incredibly powerfully. And the way that we manage around our weaknesses in our career bridge is we find the complementary partnerships that we need to be successful, and we build them. Today, we use the hallmark of Joseph's story to think about how you're going to build your career bridge using a strengths-based approach. Now, before I get into the roadmap for what we're going to touch on today, I want to bring up this question. Now, Jim Rohn famously asked, what if we're the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with? In my TED Talk, I asked, what if we're also the average of the 5 places where we spend the most time? Today, my friends, we're here to talk about your careers and building a career bridge using a strengths-based approach. So I ask you, what if building a successful career is the average of maximizing our top 5 strengths? What if building a successful career is the average of maximizing our top 5 strengths? Where's your career bridge headed now? What are your top 5 strengths? What does that look like for you? Not to worry, folks, I have a QR code for you later. And you're going to get a chance to discover your top 5 strengths if you don't know it. That's going to be something that 34 Strongs bring into you. As we jump in, folks, these are the questions that we're going to answer over the course of today. Building the bridge, strengths-based careers. What is a strengths-based approach to career development? Number 2 is going to be impact. Why does it make such an impact in creating a strengths-based career? And number 3, application. How can I apply it today? You will walk out of here today with the ability to discover your top 5 strengths. You will walk out of here today with 2 tools that you can use immediately and some questions with our QR code, which is coming. How we're going to answer these questions is by touching on these 3 different areas. Number 1, we're going to talk about identifying our individual strengths, maximizing engagement, and aligning our career paths with strengths. So we're going to look at identifying our individual strengths, and this is on the bridge to strengths-based careers. Dr. Donald Clifton, decades ago, he's known as the father of strengths-based psychology. He asked this question early in his career. What happens when we focus on what's right with people instead of fixating on what's wrong with them? Now, if you think about what's inherent in that question is the deficit mindset that's inherent in human nature. We naturally focus on what's wrong. We naturally focus on our areas of weakness and think that that's the greatest opportunity for our growth and development. That's natural. That's a part of who we are. He flipped that on its head, and he asked, what happens if we figure out what's right with people? Now, at the time, over the course of his experience, there was nothing to measure talent that existed. Nothing that measured talent that was available. And we're not talking about talent as to how far can you throw a football, how many push-ups can you do, how good of a painter are you, how good of a bass player are you. That's the important stuff for music, right? He was talking about talent through the lens of natural patterns of thought, feeling, and behavior that can be productively applied. That was his focus. Mr. Clifton spent the next 4 decades of his life studying excellence. He ended up conducting these extensive studies where he looked at over 1 million people. And what ended up happening in the behavior cycle in the studies is there's these 34 themes that emerged. These 34 themes exist in all of us, and these 34 themes are our talents effectively, and they exist within all of us in a ranked order from 1 through 34. So the interesting part is we all have the same 34, but the order is different. In fact, the likelihood of somebody having their top 5 strengths in the same order as us is 1 in 33 million. It's 1 in 33 million. It's almost as unique to us as our fingerprint. Now, today, that's an assessment. Anybody heard of the Strengthsfinder or CliftonStrengths or CliftonStrengthsfinder assessment? That's what the assessment has become today, and that's just a little bit of the backstory. I'm not going to get into all of the details on the assessment, but it consists of 177 paired descriptor statements, and you're actually timed as to how long you have to respond to each one of those. The reason for that, my friends, is because it's the top of mind natural response that we're looking at. We don't want time to think, well, how would I respond to this if I'm on the baseball field with my son? How would I respond to this if I'm sitting at an Excel spreadsheet at my desk? It's timed to just see where your brain naturally goes. And that's what the research has come out of. To date, it's been taken by more than 30 million people. You might have seen it in books like Strengthsfinder 2.0, Soar with Your Strengths, Now Discover Your Strengths, and then the bottom one, Go Put Your Strengths to Work. At the core of the Clifton Strengths philosophy, which is what it's known as today, is this African proverb. In fact, when I first met my business partner in 34 Strong, Brandon Miller, this was at the core of how we started the company. And it's if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with others. If you want to go fast, go alone. And if you want to go far, go with others. Now, when we look at this, Joseph Strauss embodied this in many ways. He went really far in his career. And he wouldn't have gotten there if it wasn't for the people that he went with and the people that he was able to attract and pull in. In the 1950s, the Department of Education commissioned a study on speed reading. So in this case, what happened is there was sophomores within an area, and they spent roughly about 6 weeks taking a course in speed reading, and they were all together, and they were going through it. What they did was they measured what their reading capacity was when they took the assessment, or before they took the course, and then they measured it again post-session. So out of this group, the average 10th grader was reading 90 words per minute. They went through, they took this course, and what ended up happening was they came out with 150 words per minute that they were reading. That's a pretty good result, right? That's pretty solid after 6 weeks or so on a course. Now, there were some of the students that were in this group, they were above average. They hadn't taken any courses before, but somehow they were reading 350 words per minute with no training. What do you think happened after they invested the exact same amount of time? Who says that their scores went down? Stayed the same? Up? Anybody? Rest of you? Well, I need to get you some coffee. Go grab some if you need it. These results astonished them as well. 2,900 words per minute. And you're saying, what were they doing? Was it a page-turning contest? That's not what they were measuring. They were actually measuring their comprehension, retention of information. And these students were clicking. I've been in a session where I've talked about this, and somebody said, I've been through one of those, and I've seen people that can read 2,000 plus words per minute. This study was hallmark at the time because it really opened up the thinking to what happens when we take a strengths-based approach to human development. This study was actually in Clifton's early work in one of his white papers early on when he was making a case for a strengths-based approach to human development. The easiest way for us to remember this is through this formula. This is the strengths formula. Talent, that natural way of thinking, feeling, or behaving that could be productively applied, multiplied by investment, right? So this is the time that we're spent practicing, honing that skill, researching, developing. It equals strength. Talent times investment equals strength. And strength is the ability to consistently provide near-perfect performance. No talk would be complete if I didn't have some statistics in the mix. Now, in preparing for this talk, I found an article on Business Insider that told me 73.6% of statistics are made up. I'm happy to report that these don't fall into that group. This is data that has accumulated over the course of time from the Gallup organization. As you can see, there's a benefits to a strengths-based approach in organizations. Now, we're here for career development. Why am I talking about what organizations are doing? Well, there's a parallel, because if organizations invest in their people and go through, they see these results. We have some responsibility in that as well, and Jennifer shared that with the components on manager engagement, that they're responsible up to a portion, but employees have to take some responsibility in that as well. On average, organizations that take a strengths-based approach to human development, they're going to see these improvements in productivity, engagement, financial efficiency, massive jump in employee well-being. A reduction in turnover and absenteeism also goes down. Now, when we think about why do these stats matter, what is engagement? We'll get into that. This is why the stats matter. Why do they matter to you? Why do they matter to me? When we're in a space where we're working from our weaknesses, when we're in a space where we're exhausted regularly, just at the thought of going to work, Sunday afternoon, our stomach's starting to turn because we got a case of the Mondays. I got to go back to what on Monday? I got what meeting on Monday? By the time we get home in the evening, to our loved ones, to our pets, to our community, whatever it is, guess what they get? Leftovers. They get the leftovers. And here's the thing, your work didn't even get the best of you. You're just battling, putting your body armor on, going through your day, ignoring, to try to not draw attention to yourself. I know all about giving the leftovers to family. I did it for a while. And this is not a place that we want to be in as we're moving forward. We've talked about identifying our strengths, and now we're going to talk about maximizing engagement and not giving our family, our loved ones, our community, whoever it is, our leftovers. All right, how many of you have been to the big island of Hawaii? Wishing you were there right now, maybe? Not right now, not right now. December 2012, my daughter was 4 months old. We took our first trip as a family with just my wife and my daughter Kira and I to the big island. One morning, I grabbed my daughter, I took her down to the beach. My wife was resting. And little Kira was taking it all in. She was staring off at the waves, looking up at the palm trees, feeling the wind blowing across her face. Periodically, she'd just glance up at me, give me a little smile. We went back upstairs. I grabbed a cup of coffee, found my wife outside on the balcony. And I sat down next to her, laid Kira in my lap. Any of you remember the first time your child, a grandchild, a cousin, a niece, a nephew laughed out loud for the first time? Show of hands. Who can remember that moment? Okay. So that happened. That was Kira laughing for the second time. I didn't know that she was going to laugh for the first time. So she laughed out loud. I took a sip of coffee, and she laughed out loud for the first time. It was one of the most amazing and one of the most terrifying moments of my life. Amazing it was for all the reasons that you can imagine. I was looking at my little girl. She did something cool. And I thought, wow, you're pure potential. Someday you're going to walk. You're going to talk. You're going to talk back to me. She's now 11 going on 12. All these things I saw. And in that moment, folks, I had to look in the mirror. You see, here's the thing. I had to ask myself, Darren, what happened to your potential? What happened to your potential? The same way I looked at her, somebody once looked at me. And if I'm not looking at myself like that or looking at others like that, where's that potential going to go? I was giving my family the leftovers at that time in my career. I was commuting several days a week, 200 miles round trip at least. It was exhausting. I was in a job that I was disengaged in. And oftentimes, when I was present with my family physically, I was psychologically absent. It's exhausting. And I knew that something had to change when I came back from that trip with Kira. And what ended up happening over the course of that time was Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things that you look at will change. So a friend of mine realized that that shift was going on, and he said, you know, there's this guy, Brandon Miller. He's going to be one of the first Gallup certified Strengthsfinder coaches in the world, one of the first of 7 that was in the world. You two ought to sit down and have a cup of coffee. We did that in February of 2013, and that was the birth of 34 Strong. Now, it didn't look like that in 2013. That's where we're at today. But in 2013, when we sat down, we were really looking to try to move people's careers along by giving them a framework and how to look at themselves through a strengths-based lens, and trying to think about how that could move the needle on many things, like engagement within their work and within their life. So, engagement. Jennifer did a great job in talking about that a little while ago. And I'm going to zoom us back out a little bit to the high level of engagement. Again, we're here talking about your individual careers. Why are we talking about organizational statistics? These are Gallup studies as well that are here. The reason why, folks, is because, as Jennifer noted, Gallup has found that at least 70% of an employee's engagement is tied directly to their manager. That's a big number. But here's the thing. You're still responsible for your engagement, too. It's easy to say, well, it's my manager's fault. No, you got to take ownership of that. We got to take ownership of that. And one of the time-tested ways in doing that is by taking a strengths-based approach. So yes, these are statistics that come from the organizational side, and yes, you have the power to take control of your career and build your career bridge using a strengths-based perspective. Now, we've got actively disengaged employees, we've got disengaged employees, and we have engaged employees. Now, actively disengaged, there's a term for them. They're called cave dwellers, consistently against virtually everything. Anybody ever experienced one of those in your life, whether it's within work or crossing paths in different places, right? These folks cost the U.S. economy. It's estimated that it's in the hundreds of billions of dollars. And the reason why, they're comfortable sabotaging forward progress. They're comfortable putting the nail strips up, actively trying to tear the organization down. They're comfortable getting injured on the job. There's real costs with active disengagement. Disengaged employees are looking at it, okay, we got an 8-hour day. Maybe we'll get a good solid 4 or 5 hours. They're not necessarily running the ship aground, but you're not going to find them on the extra mile. Okay? Now, our engaged employees, they're the ones taking initiative. They're innovative. They're thoughtful. They're getting things done, and they're aligned. They feel energized by the work that they're doing. And when we look at these slides here, right, for those of you that are managers out here, the absolute worst thing you can do is ignore your people. When you ignore your people, we have 2% engagement. And that's probably the manager that's ignoring people, maybe. You've got 40% active disengagement and 57% disengagement making up that workforce. You're going to have a lot of problems there. Ignoring is the worst. The middle ground tells us that focusing on the negative characteristics is better than ignoring them. We have a boost there to where engagement does improve because, hey, I'm seen. At least my manager is seeing me and connecting with me. And we move to 45%. The dark blue is the engagement number. We move to 45% engaged and about 33 and 22% between active disengagement and disengaged. Now, when we move all the way to the right, this is considered world-class according to Gallup. And this is where we start seeing the numbers above 60% in the category of engagement in organizations. We see this move, we see this shift in what's taking place. And the most important part about this is that we've reduced active disengagement, the most costly portion of disengagement, down to statistical insignificance. That's how it shows up. And this is from some of the Gallup data over their years of research. Now, we're doing a talk on strengths. It's 3:55 in the afternoon, so you guys got to exercise. Now, Nick told me not to have you get up and do squats, so I won't do that. I was thinking about it. What I want us to do, folks, is there should be pens and paper on your table. If you have a pen and paper, you'll need to grab those. But if not, there's some that are placed on your tables. Okay? So if everybody could grab one of those, and when you have it, just draw a line down the center of the page. I promise no squats or push-ups will be involved. But if you do feel like you need to stand up for a minute, it is late in the day. Go ahead and do that. While those are being passed out, I will give the instructions for this exercise that we're going to do. I'm going to give you 30 seconds when I say go. And all you're going to do on the left-hand column of your paper, again, draw a line straight down the center. All you're going to do on the left-hand column is write the word strong as many times as you can in 30 seconds. Don't do it until I say go. And then we're going to tally those. See, we got some competition strengths in here. I see some people like, I'm going to get started right now. Just give me a second. So 30 seconds you're going to have to write the word strong as many times as you possibly can on the left column. Just so I can know that everybody's ready, I need to see pens in the air. So you actually do have to raise your arm or your hand as best as you can. There we go. OK, now switch hands. Oh, there's the gasp. Oh, my gosh. It's leg day, right? Same instructions. Same instructions. You should have the pen now in your non-dominant hand. And then we're going to test some results here. Okay? This is going to be a visceral experience of strengths coming up in just a moment. All right? Folks, on your mark, get set, go. Remember the way that the letter S and T go, and R. "15 seconds remain. Pens down, my friends. Pens down. 6 or more. Count them up. Who had 6 or more? Put your hands up. I need you to participate. 6 or more. 7 or more. Okay, look around. We've got 3 with 7 or more. 8 or more. Okay, so 7 was the high number in 30 seconds. Words. What are the words that describe what that felt like? Give me some words. Awkward. Painful. Yeah, did anybody struggle to remember? How does the letter R go again? I think I've written the letter R thousands of times in my life, but how do you do that? What else? What are other words? Surprising. Go ahead. You did 5, okay. Hopeless. All right, confusing. It was creative. It is creative. And there are elements that can be fun in doing some of this creatively. If your paycheck depended on which hand you wrote with, would you pick that hand? Probably not, right? But yes, and I'm not going to dispute that. I'm not here to dispute that. But when we're talking about taking care of work and getting things done, this is going to be a notion of what it's like to be engaged, what it's like to play to our strengths. Let's redo that exercise, and this time I won't pull the plug on you. You can actually use your dominant hand this time. So if you're right-handed, you're going to use your right hand. If you're left-handed, you're going to use your left hand. Wait for me to say go. Now let me see the pens in the air. I promise I won't pull a switch on you. Okay, everybody's ready? On your mark, get set, go. Pens down. 7 or more, hands up. Look around the room. Everybody take a look around the room. 7 or more. 8 or more. 9 or more. 10 or more. Okay. How much time did you have? 20 seconds, that's right. I told you I was going to give you 30 seconds, but I lied to you. So I don't know if you want to believe anything else that I'm saying up here today. You had 20 seconds, all of you as a room, and you switched from a max of 7 with 30 seconds to we had several of you still at 10 and beyond. And we cut the time by 1/3. That's the difference between a strengths-based approach to human development and a deficit-based approach to human development. Give me a couple words that described at that time. Did you struggle with, how does R go again? How does the G go? What are some words that described that time?
Motoric.
What's that? Motoric? Confident, right? What was that? Flow, yes. Comfortable, right? And here's the thing. There's no comfort in the growth zone, and there's no growth in the comfort zone. But when we're in a state where we're playing to our strengths, that's in our genius zone. That's what it can look like. As we bring it into our final section, we've covered identifying individual strengths, maximizing engagement, and you got to viscerally feel what playing to our strengths was like and what it feels like to be engaged in your work through that exercise. We're going to move on to aligning our career paths with strengths. In this section, you're going to get some powerful tools that you can walk out of here and use. And I want to start by sharing this quote. So this quote is from one of our 34 Strong coaches, Jennifer Doyle Vansel. As you can see here, she's the author of the upcoming book, Create Your Strengths-Based Career. That's due out a little bit later this year. I love this quote that she has. It's, get hired for your strengths instead of in spite of them. Oftentimes in life, my friends, we go through this process. We look at what other people have, and we say, I wish I was more like them. I wish I was more like Sierra, who's here with me today. She can step into a room and make connections with everybody. I wish I was more like Paul. He's able to ask excellent questions. And he can take complex projects and break them down into structure and get the data that we need. I wish, I wish, I wish. And in the period of time, we start to have this notion of imposter syndrome. We overlook our own strengths that other people are looking at us saying the same thing about. Oh, I wish I was more like you. And we don't even know because we undervalue our talents. One of my favorite stories on this comes from Captain Catherine Chu. Kat, as she goes by, was promoted to Deputy Director at the FDA in the Division of Drug Information several years ago. And when she moved into that role, she worked closely with her director, and they had known each other for a period of time before that. And when she was working with her director, she looked around and she says, gosh, my director is just such a doer. She's an achiever. She just gets all these things done. And she could step into a room and influence people and connect them and move ideas through them to action. Kat was data-driven, and she was very relational and caring. She had a very strong, caring approach to the way that she connected with her people and really wanted to understand where they were at. She continued in this imposter syndrome state for a couple of years, thinking, I have to be less of who I am and be more like my director so I can be successful in leadership. A couple years into her tenure as deputy director, both her and her director had the opportunity to take the CliftonStrengths assessment. Not surprisingly, Kat's strengths revealed that she was data-driven, caring, and relational. She had the strength of developer, which made her an excellent people manager because she could meet people where they are, see their talent, and help develop them. She was really good at taking lots of information and where people were at and creating order out of complexity, which we see in her discipline strength, which also showed up. The other big reveal was she started realizing that she did not need to be more like her director. You see, Kat was actually, Kat to her director was what Clifford Payne was to Joseph Strauss, a complementary partner. What Kat could do, her director could not do. Her director couldn't do the people development, didn't enjoy it at all. It was a grind for her. For Kat, that was where she thrived. But when you put them together, they were a powerful combo. Now here's the fun part about Kat's story. In using the strengths-based approach to build her own career bridge, she contacted 34 Strong. A couple years after that, she brought strengths to her division. Her journey moved from just building her own strengths bridge to now she was trying to create career bridges for anybody that came into the Department of Drug Information. We've worked with Kat and the DDI team for many years, and over that time, nearly 100 people have come through that. Many are still on board there, but many have moved on to other areas of the FDA. They've promoted up. They became known as a team, actually, where talent was growing, and then they'd move up in other parts of the organization. Kat's journey into her own strengths and her willingness to discover and design her own strengths bridge allowed her to move forward in helping to create strengths bridges for others in their career path. We don't know where your career is going to lead, but imagine that. Imagine that. The questions that you'll see on this slide can help align your career path with strengths. These are also from Jennifer, one of our coaches. And you don't have to worry about getting a photo of this. This is going to be one of the items that's going to be in with your QR code that you'll be able to download. We got to ask, what do you bring with your strengths that you're excited about? So what is it that you bring to the table in your work that you're excited about? I get to do data crunching today. I love that. I really enjoy it. For those of you that enjoy that side. Number two is, what do you bring that you're not getting to use. Now, in some of the work that our 34 Strong has done with teams across the country, this has been a revealing part. Sometimes if we're doing a team building session or what's called an engagement focus group, where we're actually studying the results of employee engagement and then trying to figure out how to distill that data down and to be able to actually make it actionable. So we don't hit somebody used the term the battleship, so we can remove the battleship. One of the things that's revealed itself is sometimes people's strengths and their talents don't get to show up. But we can ask that question and try and figure out, what are we not getting to use? Maybe there's a version of you that's at home that you don't bring those talents to the table at work. And when your coworkers find out about it, they might say, hey, can you bring a little bit of that into the office? We need that. I've seen that personally time and time again with different teams. What do you need because of your strengths that this job provides? Maybe you love doing research, reading, using your communication strength to then put that in writing. You get to do that, and you get to contribute, and you get to have an impact. Number 4, what do you need that no one knows? Maybe, typically, you do best if your big rocks of work are taken care of in the first part of your day. That's where you show up at your best and at your strongest. And that would be, if you had your preferred perfect day, that would be how you would design it. Say, hey, I prefer not to have meetings before 9:30. Now, here's the thing. Are you going to have meetings before 9:30? Of course you will. But if your coworkers are aware of that, if your leader's aware of that, if you can communicate that, we might be able to find some other ways to where, okay, hey, 2 days a week, I'm able to have this time block, and before 9:30, I can look at my calendar on Tuesdays, and I can really dig deep into this project. How's that going to make you feel more engaged? How's that going to make you feel like you're playing more to your strengths? The other exercise that I'll go over quickly is grind, greatness, genius. So the grind zone, greatness zone, and the genius zone. There's an exercise that's going to be in that QR code that you're going to be able to actually get. So I'm just going to give you the quick overview of what these are. Grind zone, these are things that we all have to do. How many of you wake up in the morning and say, oh my gosh, I can't wait to check email? Anybody? Okay, I didn't think so, because that might be part of our grind zone. Typically, that's something that is part of the grind zone, right? These are tasks that are necessary for work to get done. We have to do them, but they're not necessarily what we love, but they're the foundation to some of the work that we do. The greatness zone is where you shine. This is where, as Raj talked about, we're actually doing work that we can operate in, and it feels like maybe we're in a state of play. We excel at them, they come pretty effortlessly, and we enjoy them. Now, when we get to the genius zone, this is where it comes so easy to us. This is where we're making world-class impact and world-class performance. Now, this is very important, okay? As a cautionary tale, if you find yourself saying, oh, everybody can do that, that's easy. And then you look around and everybody's not doing it. And you're wondering why everybody can't do it. Guess what that is? That's a sign of your genius zone. That's indicative for those that you lead that might be in their genius zone. So if you ever catch yourself saying that, that's where we want to look. Now, in the document that you'll have, you'll see that there are some blocks that go through, and it gives you an opportunity to quantify different tasks that you're doing at work and how they fit and how much time you're spending in these respective zones. Some organizations have taken that and they revisit it each month, and they ask themselves, how much time am I spending in my greatness zone, genius zone versus my grind zone? That's a way to kind of take a temperature of where we're at. Today, folks, we've answered these questions. What is a strengths-based approach to career development? Why does it make such an impact? And number 3, how can I apply it to today? The way we've done that is we've discussed identify individual strengths. We've got to figure out how to maximize engagement. and align our career paths with our strengths. So now's the time you get to take your phone out, because that QR code is coming. And within that QR code, you're going to get those 4 questions from Jennifer. You're going to get the Grind Greatness Genius exercise. That's the QR code that's there. And I can come back to that. So we close out today, and we wrap up. I take you back to that Jim Rome question. He stated, what if we're the average of the 5 people that we spend the most time with? When you think through building a strengths-based career bridge and building that bridge, what if building a successful career is the average of maximizing our top 5 strengths? Where would you be? Where are you headed? Where would you like to be headed? Maybe you're not here to build the next Golden Gate Bridge. But what's your career bridge to the career of your choice and the impact that you'd like to have over the course of your life? With that, I thank you.